All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
There is a terrifying realm beyond that which is visible to man. It is a space as real as your world, occupying the same location, yet it is completely foreign. It is the world of feminist narratives, lurking between junk science and cult mentality, inhabited by the strangest of entities, the patriarchy of feminist imagining. This is the land of wild imagination, paranoia, and social-political creepypasta that everybody knows just has to be true. You are traveling through another dimension, a dimension not of sense and reason, but of lived experiences and personal truths. A journey into a land of apprehension whose boundaries are constantly changing. You are about to enter Women's World. Women's World. Women's World. Women's World. Women's World. HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen. Every October, hordes of shrieking femshees descend upon the Halloween scene, intent on sucking all of the fun from the holiday. They wail over the sale of seductive costumes, lamenting that these are the only costumes available for women, and howling that men must ignore these market-imposed uniforms of servitude because women just don't have any other choice. They accuse the mad capitalists of the costume manufacturing industry of trapping women in the dungeon of their own provocative nature, any sexiness achieved by wearing said costumes being strictly outside the woman's control. They roar about objectification by men's haunting stares. Oh, won't someone please think of the women? No, of course not. They have other things on their minds, like maintaining the sexist air conditioning that female office workers everywhere are still recovering from as the autumn leaves begin to fall. This chilling trend of freezing poor, innocent, totally appropriately dressed women out of their jobs is widespread and penetrating, as reported by such respected outlets as Time, the Huffington Post, the Telegraph, and, Jezebel. Trapped in their patriarchally imposed skin-bearing work uniforms, there is literally nothing women can do to keep themselves warm in these heavily refrigerated environments. As a result, they are unable to do equal work, undermining an otherwise perfectly good feminist argument. Oh, the stress, the strain, the emotional labor! That's right. Men may be society's heavy lifters, but women's poor, overworked feelings work twice as hard. Sure, maybe you're the guy whose job it is to break up fatbergs in the sewers, but did you know that women are expected to be considerate and compassionate? Do you know how hard that is? And oh my God, guys, we're expected to be perfect, too. Like, we're not even allowed to admit that we poop. There are women out there seriously running around constipated just because of social norms. It's exhausting, I tell you. But don't expect to sit down and rest if you're a woman. You can't even take your perfectly acceptable body weight off of your feet during your ride on the subway because somewhere on that train you know there's a man sitting with his knees too far apart. How dare they take up so much space? Don't they know that's like where women's bags and stuff go? Ask one about it, though, and do you know what he'll do? He'll mansplain to you about just how much space you are taking up. It's enough to make a gal decide to just walk instead. That is, until the catcalling begins. Oh, the horror! An appropriately dressed gal, exhausted from a day of sexist air conditioning and emotional labor at the office, can't even walk through the shady section of town in the privacy of her own stripper heels. It's like these guys can't tell the difference between a hooker and a woman who just likes to dress like one at the office on casual Fridays. No, my legs do not go all the way up. I'm made of air from thigh to thyroid. How do you like that? Why, I just can't even.
It's patriarchal oppression, I tell you. You're getting reported to Twatter. I'm calling the thought police. I've never been so insulted in all my life, except for yesterday and the day before.
Deep within the vastness of a woman's imagination, in the void of unfettered hysteria, there is an enemy far more terrifying than the most hardened criminal. The power of self-oppression, fueled by their remarkable ability to turn ordinary, everyday things into serious, life-altering problems, which, by virtue of affecting women, must be extensions of the patriarchy. Utter bullshit, you say? Perhaps in your world, but real as anything in women's world. Women's world. Women's world. Women's world. Women's world.
Hello and welcome. Of course that was going to happen because it's fall. Welcome to Allergies with the Badgers. Welcome to HBR Talk 102. Don't Let Me Get Me, Anthem of the Modern Woman. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with she who must be obeyed, Karen Strawn, and nonsense annihilator, Lauren B., and two different antihistamines that apparently aren't working, to discuss men's issue that might at first glance not seem like one. Women's general habit of self-sabotage. And how is this a men's issue? We'll be quite happy to answer that as well. But first, a couple of other things to go over. If you haven't already, you need to head on over to badgerfeed.com and register to receive notifications if you want to know what's going on with the Badgers every day. If you want to receive or to support our work despite the latest adpocalypse, feedthebadger.com is the most stable way to help. Remember, information is power and we have it. Go to Badgerfeed for information and feed the Badger to help us share that information. And speaking of sharing information, don't forget to smash that like button and share us on every social media site you use. Grab some popcorn, throw open the gates of reason, and unleash your friendly neighborhood badgers on Normie Society. So, how is this a men's issue? The answer takes the form of more questions. When half of society is too busy shooting themselves in the foot to be fully functional members of their communities, who is left picking up their slack? If the sex of a person can mean she is never at fault for anything, even the consequences of her own choices, who is to blame? And when she is her own worst enemy, who is expected, even state-mandated, to protect her?
Oh, I think we all know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is really the thing. This is one of the things that drives me crazy about the third wave. You know, it's why I use that quotation from the Redditor Demon Spawn, who mostly hangs out on the Red Pill subreddit, but sometimes ventures into men's rights every once in a while. He said first wave feminism was about giving women men's rights without men's responsibilities. Second wave feminism was about removing women's traditional responsibilities. And third wave feminism is about putting more responsibilities on men. And that seems to be the pattern here, right? That really women are not even responsible for themselves on an individualistic basis, right? So not only are they not gender roles, that the responsibilities of gender are not imposed on them, or it's not allowed, right? Oh, they feel the pressure to shave their legs, but you're not allowed to comment on a woman's legs if she hasn't shaved them, right? That's like extremely impolite, and you'll get called a sexist for it, because expecting her to do that is sexist, right? So I mean, like these sort of the traditional aspects of womanhood that, you know, that we got rid of with birth control and abortion and all of that these were actually considered to be responsibilities on the part of women. You know, you're the only people who can carry the next generation forward. So it's your responsibility to do so. Well, we got rid of that, right? And but now, I mean, it's like we've expanded men's responsibilities to the point where even boys who are raped by adult women are expected to pay child support. That's part of the initial marital contract. That's part of the social contract covenant of marriage, is that what a man is taking responsibility by marrying a woman, taking responsibility for the products of his sexuality and for his partner in reproduction. we impose those responsibilities even when there was no marital contract to begin with, right? So, I mean, we're really getting to the point where if there's any kind of anything that even inconveniences a woman, if she has to put on a sweater at the office, right, so that her cleavage isn't showing, and if her cleavage was showing, she'd be complaining about how men are looking at it. I mean, it's like
or not
all of that.
at it.
Yeah, or not looking at it, because heaven forfend, she's not found attractive. And it's like, I'm blown away by this sort of every single aspect of life, every little thing, right? Like it's all coming from a class of women who really don't experience anything even remotely like hardship, right? They don't experience physical injury on any kind of regular basis. They've never smashed their thumb with a hammer. They've never had to even know what a hammer is, let alone which end to grab it by, right? Let alone what you do with it. They've never changed their own car tire. They've never shined their own shoes. Right? They've never done any of those things. If their shoes get scuffed, they just go buy a new pair to go with the 18 or 20 pairs in their closet. So it's like, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, like, what are you complaining about? You've got life so fucking easy. Like, how can you complain that you're oppressed? Right? Oh, I'm oppressed because in Alabama, in California, am oppressed because in Alabama, they demand that you get a transvaginal ultrasound before they allow you to have an abortion. They make you do that, right? So, but if they defund Planned Parenthood, then the equally invasive pap smears won't be free for women, right? The transvaginal ultrasound is invasive, therefore it's rape, right? Okay, even though you don't even feel it, right? Whereas the pap smear, where they crank you open with a reverse clamp, right? And it's really an unpleasant feeling. That has to be given away for free. Otherwise, women are oppressed. And meanwhile, the transvaginal ultrasound is just like, it's a wand the width of your finger, well lubricated, that they kind of move around in there a little bit. It doesn't feel like anything. I've had one. It's like I could have fallen asleep during it. Right? If the technician wasn't chatting with me. And yet an abortion involves, cranking your vagina open, dilating your cervix manually, and scraping the inside of your uterus with a freaking sharp tool. Right? That's not rape because she wants to do that. The transvaginal ultrasound that actually determines the safest method of abortion for however far along she is, determines the size and age of the fetus and how far along she is and what procedure needs to be done, right, in order to give her any kind of safety. Well, that's rape. They were calling it rape.
Oh yes, women are victims in a society where the excuse for abortion being legal is to keep it safe. Even people who disagree with it morally are told, well, you have to keep it legal so that women can safely do this thing that you have called murder. So women don't have to be in danger of side effects, bad side effects, harmful results from going in and doing the equivalent of hiring a hitman to kill their baby, right? Yeah. And anybody that has that moral objection has had to listen over and over and over again to abortion advocates. But it's dangerous if they have to do it in a back alley. It's dangerous if you don't make it legal. It's dangerous if they can't go to a reputable clinic and a reputable physician to get this done. But God forbid you take steps to make sure that the physician has all of the information he or she needs to ensure that the abortion is not botched.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, though. I can guarantee you the transvaginal ultrasound thing is not, the safety is not the only consideration. One of the considerations is, we don't want to get to the point where the cervix is dilated and find out this baby is 16 weeks along instead of 8 weeks, like we were told. Right. And the only way to detect an 6 to 8 week size fetus is, something that small is transvaginally. Like they were looking for lesions in my uterus.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And, or polyps. And so that was the only method that they could use to actually get good enough pictures. So.
Yeah. And even just that much of a difference, because there's a point at which an early abortion,
because a woman would never lie.
Right.
She would never
but
lie.
There's a point at which
to get an abortion.
Yeah, but there's a point at
weeks.
which the method they use dramatically changes. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So they can't just vacuum out a fetus that has hit the size of an apple, basically. It's not as they have to cut that up before they take it out.
Oh God!
So I'm not kidding. They go that this is just.
I know.
If people can't handle the information, it's not something that people should be supporting, right? This was one that I'll be honest. I think a lot of people that consider themselves pro-choice. Not everybody. I'm sure I'm going to get people. I know exactly what happens during an abortion. I'm still pro-choice. Fine, but a lot of people don't. They have no idea what they're supporting. And they don't realize what takes place during the procedure. They don't know what the fetus looks like. I've heard it's just tissue from... I actually got into an argument with a feminist on Twitter once who actually said that if it's just a cell, it can't be an organism. Bye-bye germ theory.
What?
Bye-bye germ theory. Hello.
Yeah.
So much for... Well, I guess she's never had a yeast infection. But
yeah.
I mean,
or herpes.
So there are people who are completely and utterly ignorant of the biology of this, right? And of course, it's very easy to convince women who have either never learned it in school or who have made an effort to avoid it, because a lot of people will also shut their ears when you start talking about the medical and biological aspects of this procedure. Because they don't want to know that. It might contradict their narrative. It might challenge their pro-abortion views.
It might gross them out. It might gross them out enough to think twice about their position on it. Yeah.
Well, surgery in general is gross. I mean, if I described the sinus surgery that I had to have, that would be gross too.
Oh God, don't.
I'm not going to. But if I described my C-section in detail, that would be gross as hell.
I've watched those. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, just even liposuction is gross.
Oh yeah.
So liposuction is really gross, actually. One of my favorite scenes in Basketball is the fake liposuction fat scene. Because it's just so gross, and you know that's milkshake mix, but it's still gross to think about it. So I mean, there's that, but the other end of it is when you think about the human grossness of it, and the idea that it's okay to form your position on avoiding the information at hand is probably one of the bigger factors that keeps feminism going. Not just with abortion, there's going to be controversy on that for a lot of different reasons, and that I understand that. But with other things like reproductive rights, like the rape culture theory that feminists espouse, and the patriarchy narrative that they foist off on people, if you think about any of those to their logical end, and you think about any of the facts related to those narratives, it's very hard to maintain that narrative. And I've watched them bury their heads over and over to avoid that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was just a guy on Twitter the other day who posted a link to sort of I don't know whether it was a Vox or BuzzFeed or some kind of mic or something video, right? About abortion, right? And protesters at abortion clinics. And, this guy in Kentucky, this governor of Kentucky or whatever, he's proposed this heartbeat bill. He's banned abortion from 6 weeks onward, right? And it shows him, and this is a guy who described the Republican Party as essentially the patriarchy party, right? This is the party that, he says the patriarchy was, constructed by men to benefit men at women's expense. And here's this Republican governor who's giving a speech and saying, well, when you allow abortion, you're allowing men to get away with it. You're allowing men to get away with not having to take responsibility for their actions.
Yeah,
and I'm like, you're allowing men to just say, oh, well, here's $500, go abort it, and they buy their way out of their consequences for $500, and that's not okay, right? And so this guy that I'm arguing with, who argued that the patriarchy is all about benefiting men at women's expense, posts a speech by this governor where his entire objection to abortion, at least in the clips provided, was about how it allows men to get away with not having to take responsibility. Well, how does that benefit men? Right? Like it's like if patriarchy, if the Republican Party was the party for men, there would be no such thing as child support, and there would be such a thing as full-term abortions free for anyone to get men out of that responsibility.
Right.
It's a huge responsibility.
That's a good
right?
point.
If that's all it was about.
It's funny that the Democrats accuse Republicans of being misogynists when, in fact, traditionalism is extremely gynocentric.
Yeah, and you wouldn't see Republicans using that men can avoid responsibility and leave women bearing the brunt of the entire thing, right? Enduring the horror of an abortion and all of that stuff, right? Or carrying the baby and raising it alone, and these deadbeats only have to pay a little bit of money, right? And they don't take responsibility. They don't make an honest woman of her or whatever, right? Like you wouldn't see those arguments coming out, right? Because the arguments coming from the Republican side are about responsibility on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's truly lacking responsibility on both sides. You know, I think this comes from. I think that women are like almost a little bit like spoiled brats. Like men are chivalrous by nature. They cater to women, and this has been going on like forever, for millennia, because they want to protect and care for and serve women. And women have just gotten used to it. They've gotten this nice, comfy, cushy space in life, but now it's not enough. They just want more. And who's got to pay for it? Well, it's the men. Anyone else in society except for them, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like another point I made, sort of in this, there's just kind of been this big, huge series of conversations that I've been involved with on Twitter for the last few days, right? And one of the things was, why isn't there a big feminist push to get women into the glass cellar jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to some degree, there is a push to get women into trades, but it's not because they're glass cellar jobs. It's actually because they're really good, well-paid jobs,
Yeah.
right? All you're doing is you're doing a little bit more work with your hands, but you're doing a skilled position, and so women in women electricians and women plumbers and things like that, right? Very, very well-paid positions, very good job security, because you can't outsource that kind of shit to Bangalore, and robots aren't going to be able to take it over, for probably at least another 20, 50 years. But when you look at the actual glass cellar jobs, so the guys who go down into the sewer, right, in their, head to toe rubber suits and gas masks and scrape literally tons of feces covered used needles, condoms, diapers, and tampons and maxi pads and shit off of the intake grates for the sewer treatment plant,
Or the streets of San Francisco.
Well, when they have to go down and do that, right? And these people are saying, well, that's because the men are keeping the women out. They're bullying women out of those positions, and it's like, really? So you find it easier to believe that tens of thousands of men who do these jobs, right, maybe hundreds of thousands of men across North America do this particular kind of job, right? That they're all assholes. You would rather believe that they're all assholes than believe that 99.99999% of women don't want to do that for a living.
Yeah, I think disgust is keeping the women out of those jobs, in all honesty.
Yeah, of course there's that. But
of course it is.
But here's the thing, like, okay, maybe guys do complain. I'm not going to say that there's not men that don't complain about, women being in a male-dominated industry, because I am one, and yes, it has happened to me. Mm-hmm. But the onus behind it, or the reason behind their concern, or what they really want to see, is that you're a person that comes in here and knows what the fuck they're doing. They don't want women around just to be the token female that doesn't know how to do anything, I need help with this, can you help me do? They don't want to deal with that. They want people who are there and are self-sufficient enough to get their job done, so they don't have to do more than what is their responsibility.
Yeah, and if we didn't have a situation where, my ex, he worked at a fish packing plant for a while, and he would come home every day, and this is after washing up at work, covered with dried fish blood, head to toe, all over his face, right? Like he literally, it was just absolutely just the grossest freaking job. And I was like, he said 80% of the employees there are women, right? And I was like, the women do what you do? And he's like, no, they don't do what I do. Mm-mm. Right? All of the men do what I do, and all of the women stand at a conveyor belt and fillet the fish after we chop the heads off and gill them, and and lift them in bins and bring them to them, right? They're doing the delicate finish work, right? Their hands don't even get dirty, right? Mm-hmm. And the closest thing to an injury they get is a cut finger. And they go home and they don't have to take a shower.
You see, I run into that myself at
and there was just, let me tell you another one. This is really gross. A guy I know from online, he was working for a very brief time at a laundry facility that serviced a hospital, and all of the intake people dealing with the dirty linens, those were all men. Mm-hmm. Right. And he's like, and you'd find syringes in the sheets. I found a finger once. Yeah. I found a finger, and these are urine, vomit, and shit-soaked sheets and towels and linens, right?
Sheets from the morgue.
Yeah, yeah. And so we take those and we shake all of anything that's solid out of them, right? And we put them in the laundry. And who takes them out of the nice sanitized linens out of the laundry, puts them in the dryer, and then folds them and packs them? Oh, that's all the women.
And see, I used to date a guy that was a house tech at the hospital I was born at. He wasn't a house tech there when I was born there. We were the same age. But they had house techs, they had candy stripers, and they had nurses' aides. Candy stripers are volunteers. Nurses' aides and house techs are the same job. They take the same education. They get different labels. The house tech does the heavy work, the gross work, the dangerous work. That hospital had a sword, and they would send the house techs up when they needed. Well, you get somebody that.
Hannah,
can you hear me?
Hannah, you've gone silent. Oh no, Hannah.
Shoot.
Okay, there you go.
I was gonna say nobody can hear you if they can't hear me, because that means my computer cycled out of internet service. So okay, I suppose we'll be seeing a bunch of Fs going through. What was the last thing you heard?
The hospital had a psych ward.
Yeah, the hospital had a psych ward. They'd send the house techs up there if they needed some muscle, if somebody needed to be kept from harming themselves or other people. And you always need muscle for that, because if you are just if you're not very strong and you're dealing with a combative person, you're in a situation where you have a higher risk of injuring the person that you're trying to protect. And you're actually in that situation with a mental health patient that's in a panic over something, if they're seeing something that's not there or something like that, where they're flailing or aggressive, you're protecting them as much as you're protecting the people around them. So they call people who are big and strong. They never call the nurses' aides, they call the house techs. And one of probably the most discriminatory thing he had to do was, and this was in Lima, Ohio. Lima has never, at least in my lifetime, and I don't think even in my parents' lifetime, Lima has never been free of significant racial tensions. And all of my life that I'm aware of, there's been gang activity in Lima. And there was a guy who was apparently subjected to a gang-style execution that didn't take right away. And he went to they got him to the emergency room, and they did everything they could, and he didn't survive. And there was a riot outside the hospital. And my guy at the time was one of many house techs who was ordered to guard the doorways.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Now, he was ex-military. But most of the guys that he worked with were just guys that took a job that takes 3 weeks of education to learn how to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you really notice it. You notice it when you realize that, even in, and here's the thing, right? The women and the men in that laundry facility were earning the same money.
Yep.
Because they were technically doing the same job, right? And if it had, and here's the thing, right? And this is further to Lauren's point, right? It's not even just, token women and stuff like that. It's that if that laundry facility only employed men, then there would be a rotation.
Yep. Or a pay grade. Like you'd get higher pay for doing the more dangerous job. This is the same way with the house techs and the nurses' aides. The nurses' aides would have complained because they felt they were doing the same job, or that their job was just as dangerous.
That's like the difference between janitor and custodian.
Yeah. And nurses' aides work hard. Nurses' aides lift people. They deal with the potential for all of the things that your guy found in the sheets. Those things are potentially in the room when you're a nurse's aide working in a hospital. But house techs faced everything that nurses' aides faced, plus those other little duties. And that was the same thing when I worked at the gas station. It was, if there was a heavy lifting job to be done, if there was something to be pulled in from the shed that was big and awkward, if there was a customer who was becoming aggressive, it was the guys who were expected to take that on. It was usually the guys that were handling, and me, who were handling unloading from the beer trucks and stuff like that. And when the truck came in, the guys were expected to do most of the heavy lifting there as well. Usually guys on the night shift too. Once in a while we had gals on the night shift, but it was usually guys on the night shift because that store had occasional holdups with weapons. I was there 6 years. There were 4 holdups with weapons, 2 guns, 2 knives. And then I also was knocked down once in a strong arm robbery where the guy just grabbed cartons of cigarettes and ran. So I actually have been I've been there for a couple of things. One, I walked in 15 minutes after my coworker was held up at gunpoint. Just literally 15 minutes later, I'm coming in and everybody's all freaked out and the cops are showing up. And if I'd have been there early, because sometimes I did get there early, and if I'd have gotten there early that day, I'd have been there for it. So I'd have experienced that. But that's mostly, like, my shift started after the time of night when that stuff usually happened, when I was working as the chief cook and bottle washer for the imitation food that we cooked. But yeah, this is pretty, and gals will play victim of, I can't get that position, I can't do that job, I'm not expected to be able to do these things. But at the same time, if they're working in an environment like that and somebody pukes in the men's room, they'll lock it and put an out of order sign on it until 2 or 3 days later when the male assistant manager comes in to clean it up.
Oh God. You know, like I worked in when I was, God, this was back in early 1990s, right? 1989 to 1993, right? I worked in this high-end hotel, and it was in one of those sort of nightlife neighborhoods, right? So there were a bunch of nightclubs. Some of them were down in basements and stuff like that, and it was a very, very popular. The pub in the hotel was very popular. Had a brewery attached to it, and had 7 or 8 different variants of its own beer that it served, and so super, super busy, popular place. Very nice. But the kind of place where on Fridays and Saturdays you would expect to see bouncers, right? Because of the neighborhood. And but they didn't want to hire bouncers because bouncers make the place look like it's a seedy place. They're not good for the image, right? And the owner was very, very wrapped up in the image of the place, right? So what they did was they hired the only bartender in the place that was not at least 6 feet tall and could carry himself in a fight was on the Canada national rugby team, right? And he had his buddy who was also on the Canadian national rugby team, also tending bar, right? But you would think that, okay, so these bartenders are doing double duty, right? They're there and they're big and they're told, right, that if there's a problem, right, the reason that we always have one of you guys on is because if there's a problem, you're expected to take on the role of bouncer. But we had female bartenders too, paid the exact same amount. They never worked alone. There was never a female bartender behind the bar alone. There were always like at least 2 bartenders and maybe 1 or 2 bar porters, right? So they were never alone back there. They always had one of these big giant men with them, but they got paid the same. They got paid the same as these guys.
I think another reason that women are men wouldn't really want women in the workplace is because they complain a lot. Like, so just today, my manager comes in and I'm literally the only female within a 30 male a 30 guy radius. Like this, there's constantly nothing but men walking in and out. Like I'm the only one in a sea of men, and what's fine, whatever. Like the only females that come through, they just come in and punch in and out or whatever, go about their business. But so and you know how I am. Like nothing really offends me. I'm not that kind of person. Like I just like whatever, I talk shit with the guys. That's how I am. But so the manager comes back and he's relaying a story to the guys because he wanted to pass along the joke or whatever. And so he was passing one of the guys in the shop, and he was playing this music, and it was like techno music, like that just I don't know. I don't listen to the shit, but so he talked to the guy and he's like, yeah, oh yeah. And he goes, yeah. Oh no, it's good music like to fuck to. So he came back into my office and he's like relaying the story, but he's saying it completely under his breath. And now, mind you, I'm not even 5 feet away. I can hear it, but he just still feels the need. Of course, it's it's raunchy. It's really not safe for work.
He can't speak freely.
Right, but I'm overhearing it, and as soon as he said the punchline, whatever, like I busted out laughing with everybody else because it was hilarious, you know. But they don't expect that. They don't expect women to be that okay with everything, because everywhere you look, these bitches are always complaining about the stupidest shit. I mean, really? Men can't sit with their legs spread too far apart because it inconveniences you in some way? But
Well, because it inconveniences you because you have to say, "Excuse me, can I sit?"
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to actually talk to another human being. You know, I never understood this whole catcalling thing. Listen, I'm not dumb. I know I'm cute. You know, I've been hit on since I was fucking 13 years old. But if you just talk to the person, look him in the face and say, "No, I'm sorry, I'm not interested," more than likely they leave you the fuck alone. You know, they're more, actually, I think men really would more appreciate a woman that will tell them, "No, I'm sorry, I'm not interested," instead of wasting their time, or you know, copping a fucking attitude because you don't like the way you know what I mean? Like,
It's like those guys that approach my daughter. You know, she gets off the bus at 1 o'clock in the morning and stops at the all-night pizza place, and grabs a pizza to take home with her, and comes out, and there's these two guys, and they've been clearly drinking, right? They're a few years older than her, and they're like, "Hey, good looking, we're going to a party." I think she was like 18 at the time, right? "We're going to a party. You want to come?" And she just is like, "Oh, no, you know, I got to get home. I have to be up for work in the morning, and I have some things to do still before bed. But thank you so much for the invitation, and it was really nice meeting you." And then she shook their hands and walked away. And like there, and we don't live in a nice neighborhood. We live in a little pretty rough neighborhood, right? But I swear to God, she was probably 2 blocks away before those guys even like kind of their jaws freaking pulled their jaws up off the sidewalk, because that's not the response they're used to,
right.
right? And they it's completely disarming, right?
Yeah.
Because especially since that being really nice diffuses the entire, you know, all of the potential negative of the situation, and then the handshake asserts an appropriate distance.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
You know,
And
It's a good response.
it's almost like if you can relate to another person, then maybe they actually see you as another person and human, and don't, you know, that their guard is let down as well, you know?
Yeah, like it's so I'm looking at it like, you know, essentially there have been, oh God, twice in my life did I come across a guy who did not take my no for an answer. Right? And it was always the "No, I don't want to dance." Right? You know, like I'm at a bar and they're like, "Let's go dance," you know, and it's like, "No, thanks. I don't dance in public, number one, because I'm a gork. And number two, you know, I'm just not interested in dancing right now." And you know, got pushy and like kind of got into like a 5 to 7 minute sales pitch, right, as to why I should go and, you know, give them a shot on the dance floor. That's about the worst that's ever happened to me, other than that one time when I was a teenager.
See, now if it was a good
Right?
sales
Like
pitch, I would have to
and
take
when you
them
look
up
at
on
it,
it.
okay, so that's four men. 4 men who would not respect my boundaries. 2 of them were like 15 or 16 years old.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Our society would think of 15 or 16-year-old as men. They wouldn't. 15 or 16-year-old girls wouldn't be thought of as women, but in that situation, they would consider those boys men.
Yeah, to have the responsibility of men, yeah. To be as criminally responsible for their act as men. Yeah.
Did you hear the story? I have to ask now because this happened, and I was really shocked when I
Are
heard
you
that
talking
this
about the
happened.
5-year-old?
Yes, in Tennessee, that got charged. I think handcuffed as well. With
Yes, we
sex
have a
abuse.
super chat on that. Jonathan Rossler gave us $5 and asked if we had seen that story. Did you guys see the story about the 5-year-old who's been registered as a sex offender in Britain? But I don't think it's in Britain.
No,
it was
it's in
reported
Tennessee.
by British
It's in
media.
Tennessee.
What's really
It's
funny
in
is
Tennessee.
all
How,
of the
why
media.
are they reporting on it?
Yeah, all of the media that I've seen reporting on it is British media, except for one. And that one, their angle was to report on the school's denial of the mother's story. Sorry, guys.
Wow.
That's it. The only American media I initially found reporting on it was calling the mother a liar.
Wow.
Now, it's possible
Well-
that she has misunderstood what the school did and freaked out about it, because I've seen that happen. But it's interesting that none of the rest of the American media has picked up on this.
I'm sure they picked up on it. They just won't report on it.
I have actually, I've advised a friend of mine because her son came home from, I think it was grade 1 one day, and told her that one of the girls in his class, and he's in a split class and she was a grade ahead of him, had cornered him in the boys' washroom and demanded he take his pants off.
Demand.
And she was just like, what the hell? Right? And she went to the school and they didn't want to do anything about it. But then she sort of asked around. And apparently there's 2 sisters and they both engage in this kind of behavior with each other. And, because it's a small town, right? And so people babysit and play dates and all of that. So these 2 girls, right? They're people who won't have them in their homes because they behave in extremely sexually inappropriate ways, right? And one of the things too about it is that apparently the family computer is in the living room, and the dad watches porn while the kids are in the room.
I was going to say, usually when you see kids that age engaging in some kind of sexual anything, they've been exposed to it at home. This is one of the things that really pisses me off about people will not report sexual aggression or even just age-inappropriate sexual behavior by little girls. Right? They'll report it by little boys. But they won't report it by little girls. And when they report it by little boys, they don't consider why the child is behaving that way. They just consider how the behavior inconveniences them or might affect other people. So in both cases, they end up hiding adult inappropriate sexual behavior around children. And it's not necessarily always like molestation, but that is a sign that a child has been exposed to an age-inappropriate type of sexual stimulation. Like, kids discover themselves, and that's a totally different thing. There's nothing age-inappropriate about that. You just have to teach them, hey, that's private. You do that when you're alone. Mm-hmm. But when you see a kid trying to engage with other kids, the first thing you should try to investigate is, where did you learn to do that? No, you're not in any trouble, but where did that come from? And if it turns out they've seen porn that they weren't supposed to see, that may not be anybody's fault, but it's one of the ways that you have the opportunity to find out if they have been victimized by a predator. Mm-hmm. And it's a missed opportunity when you criminalize a little boy's acting out on what a predator has taught him. And it's a missed opportunity when you ignore a little girl acting out what a predator has taught her. And in both cases, you're doing the child and every other child that that predator has access to a disservice. That is why, it's one of the reasons why sexual predators who prey on children gain access to a large number of children before they are caught.
Yeah. Well, it's just like nobody wants to address the fact, like the school just absolutely refused to take her seriously about this, and she ended up having to just tell her son that, like, just you're just going to have to do whatever you can to avoid this girl, because like she's not somebody that you want to be around.
See, we had a
Well, but
situation like that
it,
with my
it
little
was
brother when I was a kid. It wasn't that blatant. There was a little girl that liked him, and she would chase him around at recess and push him down and try to kiss him. And I mean that's more innocent little kid behavior. That's not necessarily indicative of having been victimized by anybody. She's seen romances on TV and crap, and she's acting like a little girl. But she didn't have the discipline that a parent usually gives to a child to teach them, hey, you learn to respect other people's boundaries, right? Well, my brother almost got in trouble at school for running away from this girl, actually, because she fell down and ripped a pair of jeans that was in the 80s, $50 for a pair of children's blue jeans.
Oh my
Like,
God.
I wouldn't pay $50 for a pair of children's blue jeans now.
Yeah.
But that's what her mother said. Oh, these were $50 pants on a fourth grader, right? On a fourth grader, you put $50 pants on a child that's going to get grass stains on their knees, or at least if they're a normal child. And she it was mad, not because her daughter was behaving inappropriately towards my brother, but because he ran away. He tried to enforce.
My God.
How dare that boy try to enforce his boundaries, right?
I remember.
She was the victim.
I remember in grade 1, and this is what I really liked about my grade 1 teacher, Mrs. Sulek. She caught me, me and another girl, we were chasing a boy around the classroom before class was in session in the morning, right? Chasing him around the classroom, going, okay. And he was, and I think we were all having fun, but it was a game, right? And I would not have wanted to kiss him, because no, but she told him to sit down, and then she told me and the other girl, okay, so once class starts, you're going to go and kiss the cheek of every boy in the class. Now get going. Right? And that was excruciatingly humiliating for me. Like, it was just like, that was an exercise in learning people's boundaries, right? Because it was just like, and the boys were just like, they were just like, okay, I gotta do this, because it's just, but it's with one kiss on the cheek, no big deal, right? But I had to go and kiss every boy on the cheek in the whole class, right? And, I never did that again.
That just seems kind of dirty. This is why these fucking kids, they pass germs around to everybody.
Oh my God. Well, I didn't lick any of them, right? But
it doesn't matter. All you have to do is touch them. Shit. Have you seen...
They should all sell autographed pictures of their cheeks now.
Yeah, right.
Kissed by Karen Strawn.
But shit, like DNA can be passed from, the most inconsequential, just touching or rubbing up against a person. If I'm not a germaphobe by any stretch of the means, but knowing what we know about like DNA and how things passed, I wouldn't want to be just randomly touching other people, especially kissing them.
I was just thinking of how she used those boys as props in her punishment.
Oh.
Yeah, no, and now looking back on it now, but I don't think any of the boys really minded, right? Like they weren't grossed out or anything, or they didn't seem to be. They seemed to be like, Karen's getting in trouble.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much.
She deserves it, right?
That's
you can
kids.
lay one on here, right? Yeah. I think there was one boy in the class who kind of looked uncomfortable. He was just generally awkward to begin
Kinda
with.
shy.
So.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. You force somebody to approach another person that's shy, and the shy person ends up not. And I can sympathize with that because I've always been kind of like that. I can be boisterous and everything, but when it comes to direct interpersonal contact, a lot of times I can be uncharacteristically shy. It's a completely weird thing, and then when it hits, I'll be completely, and not just awkward, but flat out dumb. I won't be able to talk right. I won't know what to do. I'll look funny. Goofy would be a perfect character for me to identify with in those instances, right? I'm like, yuck. It fits because I'm tall and gangly and awkward, and I used to be ultra skinny, like that guy from Road Trip that they took his car. I can't think of his name, the actor's name, but I was skinny like that for a while because I'd been sick. So I would have in that position, if I'd have been a little boy in that position, I'd have been like, that would almost have been a punishment for me, even if I liked the girl, because it was in front of everybody. Everybody was watching.
I gave him an air kiss on his head, and the teacher let me off with an air kiss on his head. Probably
because it was uncomfortable for him.
He put his head down and leaned away.
Yeah.
Right. And I was just like, oh, but I have to. Okay. And air kiss on his head, but yeah, it was just one of those things that I never did that again, because it's like, but then again, when there I was as a teenager, and we have PSAs on staying physically fit, right, and exercising, and there's this one where you have the Italian song, the Italian sort of love song playing in the background, and there's a boy just running down the sidewalk away from these two girls, and they're chasing after him, and then they catch him, and they kiss both of his cheeks, one on each side, and they're kissing his cheeks, and his face is all scrunched up, and then it just says "stay fit because you never know."
Oh God.
And these are 8-10-year-old kids, and I'm looking back on it, I'm like, that was a PSA on staying fit. Yeah, stay fit so you don't get sexually assaulted as a 10-year-old.
Well, I mean, that little girl that chased my brother, that wasn't the only one. I will never forget him. He was a cute kid, okay? He looked like Elliot from the E.T. movie, right?
Okay.
I mean, he was that cute. And he was the kid who, if he looked at his older sister with big blue eyes, and he had these freckles that went under his eyes, over his cheeks, and then over his nose, and his ears stuck out a little bit. Mm-hmm. So he was just this cute, adorable little boy. And I was 2 years older than him. And he could actually get me to do his chores by looking sad about having to do them, because he was just that adorable. So this girl chased him home from school. He comes running into the house, he slams the door, throws his arms against it, and leans against it. He's literally going, and I look out the front, and there's this little girl singing to the na-na-na-na-na-na song, but it's his name is a cutie pie. And I'm just like, oh my God. I'm just like, do you want me to go out there and tell her to leave? No! And it's cute and funny because little kids do it. I mean, I had boys chase me and kiss me when I was a little girl, too. I looked like Ramona Quimby. If you pictured Ramona Quimby from the Beverly Cleary stories in your mind, based on her description, that was little Hannah. I've got pictures. If you see them, there were Ramona Quimby movies. I had the haircut and everything. That movies didn't come out till the 90s. And I looked at the little girl in the movies. I'm like, they modeled that after me. I swear to God. But in any case, I got chased by boys, and it was definitely a boundary issues thing, right? But at the same time, on the inside, you have this warm, fuzzy, they like me, that happens with all the little kids. And you still want to enforce your boundaries. You still teach your kids, you respect other people's boundaries. This is not an appropriate way to express affection. And they learn as they get older to approach each other. Hi, my name is, or that's an interesting camera you've got there, or any other way to break the ice they can come up with. I had a guy break the ice with me. Actually, the hospital guy broke the ice with me by approaching me when I was at a Walden Books looking at Dungeons and Dragons books, looking to switch from first edition to second edition. And he goes, "Do you know if they have the Charlemagne's Paladin book?" So we spent a while looking for it. And that's how he broke the ice. We started talking about our gaming groups and everything. But yeah, kids and boundary issues is a major thing. It's just that we, in our society, we treat it very differently when boys are awkward about learning to break the ice and learning to navigate other people's boundaries than we do when girls are awkward about it. And in today's society, we've polarized that to a very unhealthy degree.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I have a different kind of first grade story here. So when I was in first grade, I was really precocious as a child. I don't remember ever asking my parents like where babies come from. I just kind of always had a sense about it. And so, when you get to school, you get these books and, we're learning about our bodies and everything. So, I I knew what the difference was between male and female. All right. Well, so when I was in first grade, I had a friend, and a girl, female friend. We were like thick as thieves. But we always had lunch together, and there was a couple of guys that would sit close to us, and we'd have lunch or whatever. And during lunch, as we were sitting at the table, like we would try, me and this girl, we would like try under the table. We would try to kick the guys in the balls. And
Oh,
I know it's horrible. I feel fucking horrible about it. But, I don't know if we actually made contact or whatever, but you would think that would say, "Oh no," to a guy. No, I'm not. Fuck this bitch. I'm not sitting next to her at lunch. But every single day they would sit right next to us, because it was the attention. And, it was innocent in a way. Like, yeah, we were like balls and shit, but it was really that young. You're fucking 6, 7 years old, and you're trying to, again, learn your boundary, what you can do to another person that will make them react, and what that reaction says to you. It teaches you a lesson. So, this horseplay between kids, it can be affectionate, it can not be affectionate, it can be kind of harmful. But again, I don't think this is something that we should be discouraging,
Yeah.
but at the same time, yes, it should be monitored, and you should make sure that everybody's, not like doing detrimental harm to each other. But at the
Like
same
actually
time,
kicking the guys in the balls?
well, yeah. I swear they kept coming back. It must not have been that bad because they kept coming back.
Well, that's just it. When kids discover the enjoyment of the attention of the opposite sex, which they discover long before they have a concept of anything to do with like the adult mating rituals that our species goes through and all that, it's just to enjoy the attention of the opposite sex. A lot of horseplay ensues, and it is innocent. It's a learning opportunity for the kids, and it's a teaching opportunity for adults. No, it's not okay to show a boy that you like him. Wouldn't you be, show him better if you took him some cookies?
Yeah.
Like that might make him happy. Kicking in the shins doesn't make him happy. Kick him in the balls, that really isn't going to make him happy. Give him cookies,
see,
right? Unless he's into that kind of thing, which you don't want to explain to a child.
Right. I think that just kind of speaks to who I am now as an adult. Like I don't take shit from nobody. Like I'm just
yeah, okay.
You know what I mean?
Obviously,
Like,
feminist men really do need to be afraid of you then. But no, it does speak to how much a guy will endure though for a gal's attention once he discovers he enjoys that. Not getting kicked in the balls, but enjoys a gal's attention. Right? He'll take that level of risk. Right? He'll take that level of, oh my gosh, this is going to hurt really bad if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
And he'll put up with it. And this is one of the things that is really detrimental to both sexes. We are teaching our little girls that they are victims of boys' attention. And we are teaching them at the same time that they are victims of not getting boys' attention if they want it. And then we're also teaching them that they are victims of the process of learning to navigate other people's boundaries, and the process of learning to navigate and communicate and enforce their own boundaries. Now, how the hell are they supposed to grow up to be in functional relationships with members of the opposite sex if they're heterosexual? How are they supposed to do that if they can't learn those lessons? How are boys supposed to, like, we constantly hear that boys are supposed to grow up and learn to respect women, which most of the people who say that don't even understand respect anyway. But we hear that all the time. How are they supposed to respect somebody who cannot engage with them in any way, shape, or form without coming out on the other end of that engagement as a victim?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it brings it right back to the workplace, because these women that never grow up, we hear all the time about how women mature faster than men. Well, maybe physically, but not mentally, right?
Well, the mentally, here's the problem, right? Women do actually mentally mature faster. Or girls do mature mentally faster than men, but they stop maturing earlier.
Yes.
So they're done earlier. And men have an extra 2 to 3 years after their female same age peers are all done, right? Where they're still growing intellectually and psychologically, right? So, and one of the things about that is, when I did the video on neoteny ages and ages ago, is you have a situation where if you have to grow up, if the deadline is earlier, that's less time to develop, right? So, I mean, if the reason why chimpanzees can't speak is because certain genes in their brains turn on and then off again at an earlier stage of development, and there's no time to build the necessary structures in their brains that would actually facilitate a reasonable amount of speech. They can pick up vocabulary, maybe speak in sign language, things like that, but they have no grammar. And grammar is really what speech is. It's really what language is grammar. So when you look at that and you think, okay, so these chimpanzees, that's all cut off at about, age 2 or 3. That's when the genes switch off and the deadline's been hit. That's the hard barrier. And they're never going to learn anything more, or never have the capacity to learn anything more than they would at that age, right? Which is why if you don't acquire speech, if you don't acquire language by age 6, if you're human, then you're never going to acquire full language ability, right? So, I mean, when you're looking at that kind of thing, right, and the fact that men stop maturing later, maybe men are actually more mature than women. And I say this as a late bloomer. I'm just going to say that.
Sorry, I couldn't jump in there for a second. Nobody wanted to hear me sneezing over. I'm like sitting here, holy white nose, going, I'm not going to sneeze, I'm not going to sneeze, I'm not going to sneeze.
It can't be more distractive than Kevin or Borat borking.
I had been in the middle of typing. I had to sit there with one hand and hold my nose with one hand and hit enter with the other one. No, I was just saying this in chat. The differences in maturity, I think there's some misunderstandings about the increases in maturity and everything. There are ways girls mature socially more than boys, but when you really look at various hallmarks of responsibility, accountability, understanding of their position in society, and so on, boys and girls mature at fairly equal levels in most ways. They go different pathways, but in most ways, right up until they hit high school. And girls seem more mature than boys in a lot of ways in high school because we have lower expectations for their peak maturity than we do for boys' peak maturity when they hit manhood.
Well, I think too because they are more socially and linguistically adept.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they have that advantage of being able to sell their accountability to society, their whatever level of accountability they've hit. They're able to sell their competence to society in the form of how they perform academically at that age.
And how they interact socially and stuff.
Right,
you know?
right.
But what I find interesting too is this kind of reversal because, you know, throughout all of human history, including, you know, my childhood and my mother's childhood and my grandmother's childhood, right? The sign of emotional maturity was when you mastered your emotions, when you didn't burst into tears over the smallest thing, when you didn't emote all over the place, when you didn't vomit your emotional baggage all over everybody around you, right? And that's completely turned around. Now that's seen as a sign of emotional maturity. If you just freaking emote all over the place, express every single fucking fleeting emotion that comes into your head, express that, because that's emotional maturity. No, toddlers do that. Yep. My dog just did that. Okay? She's like, how dare you walk on my sidewalk? I can't tolerate this. Borat, you don't even know what she's barking at. And they can't control themselves, right? And that's supposed to be emotional maturity.
Yep, that's supposed to be emotional maturity.
Yeah, and that's what they want men to do. They want men to just become these slobbering, just emotional, blubbering, oh, this is how I feel.
It's called emotional incontinence.
Yes.
Right? Well, and you wouldn't want that for your anus. Why do you want it for your emotions?
Yes, let's not have anything on Earth that we wouldn't allow on Uranus. So just, I know for the nerds in the gallery there, it's Uranus, but it's still more fun to pronounce it Uranus.
No, I thought we changed the name of that planet. We got sick of that joke. We changed it to Eurectum.
Oh, there we are. But, jeez. The thing that I should probably point out about this, because somebody pointed it out in relation to my monologue with the clown world theme and all of the feminist arguments, we have discussed men's suicide and men's higher rate of completed suicide attempts than women, that say women attempt more but complete suicide less frequently than men do.
So and they're failures.
And, well, yeah, I guess they fail at suicide, but the point is, one of the things that feminists in general, in particular, and now the greater discussion on mental health in general has said is that men need to just learn to be more like women and express themselves more. So they need to be more like the sex that attempts suicide more.
Yeah, they need to be more like the failures.
Well, that's my question, because we already know that men specifically select methods of suicide that are going to be more effective, more immediately effective. If they bleed emotion more, and the comparison is to the gender that attempts more, is that really going to help them? No. Bleeding emotion more?
I don't think that's what men need. Men need solutions. It's like I've always had a more masculine outlook, and it's always been kind of a, you know, okay, here's a problem. How do we solve it? How do we deal with it? Right? I don't want to storm around the house ranting and raving about it. I don't want to cry about it. I don't want to do any of the. I don't want to necessarily talk about it. The only time I ever want to talk about a problem is when I don't see any solution,
Yeah.
right?
Like maybe somebody
And-
else can give you an idea that you haven't already thought of.
Yeah, but or I just talk through it until one night I'll wake up sit bolt upright in bed at 2:00 in the morning and go, oh fuck, that's what I'm gonna do. But essentially, like my entire approach to problems is, at least problems within my life, right, that I have some control over, is, okay, how do I fix it? Right. And once you fix it, and if I can't fix it, if it's something that it can't be fixed, right, and it's a personal problem to me, then I do actually engage in avoidance. I go off and I do something else, right? Because sometimes when I'm off doing something else that's useful, the solution will come to me, or I'll come to essentially a realization that there are some problems for which there are no solutions.
Yes.
And I'm just going to have to figure out how to cope.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's always been my approach. And that seems to be more the way men approach things than women. Women want to talk endlessly around things. I've stopped picking up the phone when certain female friends of mine call, because they just want to bitch about their lives. And it's just like, I have things to do, right? And and I'm not doing them while I'm listening to you unload your day on me,
right?
Regurgitating the same shit you went through yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like, okay, if it's a problem, fix it. If it can't be fixed, live with it.
Right.
Like,
right.
God.
I think because, I think us three women and most women who are not feminists or not feminist leaning, I think we kind of are the same way. I don't. A lot of women, or I would say in general, women, when they complain about things, they complain, to whomever, because they want a solution. There's not a lot of people out there like us who will look at problems that we have in our lives and figure out how to deal with them and fix them without needing someone else to come in and perform an intervention. We deal with it. We just fucking deal with it. I don't need someone to try to come and fix my problems. And if I do have a problem that does need to be fixed that I can't handle, I'm more than happy to, say, look, can you give me some kind of advice? But I don't use that as a crux. I don't use that as, I don't look to everyone else to try to solve my own problems.
Well, I think a big problem between men and women.
Getting advice is fine.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I think a big problem between men and women in terms of communication on problems is, there's a book that was written, I think, back in the 90s that was a real disservice to everyone, in my opinion. Not because of what may or may not have been in the book, but because of how people discussed it. Because I honestly, the discussions around it led me to not want to read it and not want anything to do. And that was a book titled Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And one of the things that ended up being discussed around that book was the idea that men approach their problems by doing, and women approach their problems by talking about them. And women need validation when they talk about their problems, and you're not speaking women's language if you don't offer validation before you offer a solution, and that's why they get mad at you. And I don't know if that was even really in the book or not, because I remember hearing something about the writer of the book coming out and saying, no, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean for people to accommodate that behavior. I was calling it a dysfunction. So I don't know if that was...
It's not about the nail.
Right?
It's not about the nail.
I don't know if that was actually something that was just more conversation around the book, or if the author actually said that. I would respect the author more if that were the case. But the reality is that's not necessarily a gender division. I know lots of women who are happy to get advice. Now, they'll tell you if they've already tried something, right? Oh, yes, I tried that, and this happened. Or, I tried that, and it worked for a while, but... And, you end up with a back and forth. And it's specifically women who just want to have their victimhood acknowledged that are the problem. When it's not about the nail, then it's about maintaining a dysfunction in order to maintain a state of mind. And I'm going to compare it to back when I used to have my anger management was actually a problem. And you get into a situation where you think something is gone wrong or something is bad, that you have a reason to be angry about it, right? And you get a good mad going, and then you find out that the information you had about the situation you're angry over was not correct, and you don't have a reason to be mad about it. That actually is infuriating. If you're wallowing in a good mad, I'm going to yell at somebody, I'm going to write angry poetry. I used to write a lot of angry poetry. None of you will ever see it because it sucked. Angsty teenage girl poetry should never be read by anybody. But in any case,
all my angsty teenager poetry was about boys. And
no,
you'll never see it.
A lot of mine was about other people not having the right to tell me who I was supposed to be, which they do, actually. I don't have to listen, but people do have a right to express their opinions.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Nobody's above criticism. But I went through a period of refusing to acknowledge other people's right to express criticism. So in any case, you get that good victimhood on, right? And I've seen this, and I've done it myself when I was younger and really immature, where you just want to be pampered, and you want to wallow in feeling sorry for yourself and being angry at the world or resentful of something, and you don't want to let go of that. It's like almost, it's not addictive, but it's definitely a pattern that there's a sense of laziness about not wanting to get out of that pattern.
Yeah.
And when you have to fight that tendency, that's in a way it feels offensive to have to fight that. Why should I have to fight this? This is mine. I own it. It belongs to me, and I have a right to enjoy it. But you don't.
Yeah,
and you don't have especially to enjoy it a right to enjoy it at other people's expense.
Well,
So when it's
you-
not about the nail, it's basically about the selfishness of the person who doesn't want to deal with the fact that their refusal to deal with the nail has consequences for the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody remember that scene story where Ralphie says a swear word and his mom washes his mouth out with soap?
Yes.
Right. And then he goes to bed that night and he's so upset, and he's just like, and I lay there and wished that one day I would go blind, because then they'd be sorry for treating me so badly. Right. And then he goes through the whole fantasy where he walks into the house all blind with his sunglasses on and his cane. Right. And they're like, "Oh, Ralphie, what happened? Oh no, what's become of you?" And he's like, It was soap poisoning. And they're like, "Oh no, what have we done?" Right? Okay. And it's like there is a certain satisfaction in those kinds of fantasies. If something really horrible happens, then they'll all be sorry. I remember as a child, right, wishing that something bad would happen to me, so then my mom would be sorry for sending me to my room or whatever the fuck, right? Okay, as like a 7 or 8 year old, I remember those feelings, right? And I remember I remember one time I threw a massive fit, right? As a child, I think I was about 5 years old. I threw this huge fit. And my mom was like, "Okay, that's it. I can't tolerate you right now." And she put me in my room and closed the door and said, "You stay in. If that's how you're going to behave, you stay in there." Right? And I screamed 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 and I screamed. And nothing happened. And then I got tired out and I started to play. And I was goofing around in there. I was kind of dancing in front of the mirror and goofing around. My mom opened the door and caught me in the act of enjoying myself. And I was so embarrassed. So embarrassed that she'd caught me in the act of enjoying myself. And then it made me mad all over again. Because she'd caught me in a state of having gotten over it. I mean, like, this is a shit that goes through kids' heads, right? I don't think people realize, particularly people these days, millennials and stuff like that, they don't necessarily remember their childhoods very well, or maybe they didn't have similar experiences to me. I don't fucking know. But they certainly have, a lot of them have never seen those same things play out with their own children, because a lot of them don't have children, right? And I think that they think that everything that they felt back then was 100% valid. And it's like, no, you were a half-formed you had mush for brains, right? You were a child, right? And the idea that going into your adulthood, right, expressing yourself with all of the emotional maturity of a toddler, and that means that you are, the blueprint for human adulthood. Like, no. And I see that, like, the screaming freaking the no woman at the Trump inauguration.
Mm-hmm.
She's the epitome of that.
Yes. Yeah. I'd love to know who she is and if anyone has found her name. I mean, not that I want the woman to be doxxed, or is she a woman? They, I guess I would say then.
Well, looked like a woman to me. Looked like an androgynous woman or a butch lesbian or something, but looked like a woman to me, and which made it more amusing, I guess. But no, that's the epitome of toddlerhood.
Exactly. Like I talk to a lot of people, and through the conversations that I have, I always like to ask the person, well, how old were you when this thing happened to you? What happened in your child? Because it really does shape a person. And I think we just don't really understand what it is to live in another person's shoes. Like, for instance, a child losing a parent at 2 years old is completely different from a child losing a parent at 20 or 15 or whatever. It's completely different. It impacts you differently. And we don't take enough time to stop and really, again, it goes back to the story that you were talking about, where if someone approaches you in a certain way and you're not happy, or you feel it's intimidating, if you just try to relate to that person, then you might understand them a little bit better. And I think we have lost that. And I think a big part of that is the invention of the internet, because now we can all interact remotely. I don't have to physically see you to interact with you and form a relationship with you. um it just really takes the personality out of it. It just really takes away some of that personal interaction.
It removes boundaries too, right? Like, so you actually have to have these codes of conduct and community guidelines and stuff like that on these platforms, because you're not seeing the other person face to face, and you will say things that a lot of people will say things that they would never say to anybody's face, because they know that they'd get a shot to the chops
Yeah.
if they talk that way to somebody's face. If they said those words in that tone to somebody's face, they'd be risking a beating, right? And or a physical escalation of some kind, right? And they even if the physical escalation was just the clenching of a fist and more and shouting from the other person, that's really intimidating when you get that face to face. It's actually the idea that that when somebody is standing in your face yelling at you, which is what people do on Twitter all the time, right? Most people don't experience that in their average day, right? They don't. And when they do, it's deeply unpleasant. And yet people are doing it on Twitter all the time, knowing how it feels, right? And they can do it because they don't see the other person on the end of that. And they also, they know that the other person is cushioned by the fact that there is this social media barrier in between them that is preventing them from actually being face to face, right? So it's not affecting the person on the receiving end as much, and it's also the person on the giving end is completely uninhibited, right? And I think that is part of why our political discourse is so toxic right now, is because people don't have to actually go face to face. Even when you look at, and this is one of the things that I get annoyed with Tucker Carlson about, like usually I find his monologues are pretty good and whatever, but whenever he's interviewing somebody who's like completely hostile to his position or he sees an opponent, he goes pure cutthroat. Well, the reason he goes pure cutthroat is because he can't see that person.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're remoting in. And when you're remoting in, because I've done this a few times, when you're remoting in, you can't see the host and the host can't see you.
I disagree on the distance being the reason, because I've had pig shit thrown in my face by people who've had opposing viewpoints. And they walked right up to me, saw me, knew that I was a teenager, and still threw pig shit in my face. That was at a pro-life rally.
Oh, well, that explains it.
But it doesn't. It's a contentious issue, and people have been that contentious over it for years. I mean, we've had this is actually how war happens.
Abortion is probably the most contentious issue right now,
it is still something that people will walk up to each other, and this is. I mean, we're talking clear back in the mid '80s. Okay. Now, that's not the only thing that I've seen that over. I've had things thrown at me by people from my hometown when I was a teenager also, because they disagreed with my mother's position on city politics, and sometimes over very minor things. And we did have one controversy that got very heated that was really kind of strange. That I could do an entire video on that, longer than my opening monologues, and still not get all of it explained, all of the nuance to it explained. But it really was a power struggle between political factions in my community that I grew up in. And people got physical over that, too. People do get physical over things. And I really don't think that the political environment today is necessarily more contentious or more combative between people. I think that it's more, the verbal end of it is more visible, because when you throw pig shit in somebody's face and walk away, that's done and over with in the moment. And if somebody hasn't videotaped it, it's gone. It happened, it's over, it's gone. If there isn't a legal repercussion, because we didn't know who that person was, we couldn't press charges. They did it to a whole bunch of people, and then ran off. And it's not like today where the people who do that come up and they have, rainbow hair and other really easily identifying features.
Aposematic.
Right? It was one of it was one of like 50 women with long brown hair in broomstick skirts and fading tank tops. Which one do you pick? And you're not even really sure which of them threw at you specifically, and they're gone. And now what do you do? It's a very different thing. But when you type something shitty out to somebody and they screenshot it, or they archive it on archive.is or the Wayback Machine or one of the, Freeze Page, one of the many other little archive sites out there. It's permanent. People see it, and it can go viral, and lots of people will see it. And like the moment with the lady that screamed, if that had happened at Reagan's inauguration, people might have forgotten it shortly after, because the news media didn't give a shit about that stuff. They didn't cover stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or if they did, they didn't cover it heavily, and it was gone the next day, right? But this, if I remember right, this wasn't captured by news media. It was captured by somebody's cell phone, and that, unless she sat in front of a news camera on purpose, that goes viral not because news media covered it, but because people found her behavior to be outwardly bizarre. She was interviewed by the Daily Caller, someone from the Daily Caller, by the way, or at least someone whose interview was published in the Daily Caller, and she was just as nuts as the scream indicates. She said, "There's just no way. There's just no way to even comprehend what this means. It means Trump is president." For me, this very moment is like within a cell. It's like the dark and the light are so tight right now in this moment. There's so much potential for beauty and for devastation in this one moment. It's almost incomprehensible that they can exist right now. So close. And then in all caps, "I am so sorry to my world." This is not what we want. I love you people. I love people. This is so alien. This is so false and broken and ... It goes on. So that kind of reaction, that's a meltdown. That's somebody reacting to a person with a political perspective getting into a position of power as if the Antichrist has spawned and taken over the country. And like it's been that way. All of my life, American politics has been that way. It's just now you see it in black and white on Twitter.
Right. Exactly. And we have to the point that I believe you made earlier, it's not about explaining their behavior. Yes, there are situations can explain these people's behavior. It doesn't excuse their behavior. And I think that's a big distinction that needs to be made. Yes, there are reasons that people react in this way, but it does not excuse them from acting like toddlers. I'm sorry you feel this way, but no, you don't just get to go riot in the street and bash people's fucking business stores in, bashing the windows in or whatever. That's not just because you are angry and upset about something, it doesn't give you the license to go then trash someone else's property. And then that's a big distinction. Like you don't just have the license to act any way you want to just because you feel like you're aggrieved. But this is what we have been diminished to. So how do we react? How do the rational people around us react? Well, we look at these people and we point them out and we say, "Listen, what you're doing is idiotic. Just sit down and calm down, drink some water. Let's put some sense into you and let's have a real conversation about what's happening and let's flush all of the bullshit that's been put into your brain. Let's flush that out or at least present to you a new set of facts that you can then hopefully digest and maybe come up with a different set of solutions to problems that you feel are problems."
This is one area that it's a difficult thing, particularly with women, because women already have a natural tendency to have we discussed this a while back. I labeled it the wrong think boogeyman. The victim identitarian set in particular, because they're infected with a way of thinking that makes it very difficult for them to examine information that contradicts their victim narrative, right? And that was deliberate. That's, again, Yuri, I believe it's Brezhnev, and I'm going to make sure I pronounce
Bezmenov.
I always want to put R's in words that aren't. It's one of the fun things about being a little bit dyslexic. But anyway, what he described, the process of demoralization, that for that particular generation was about communism versus American capitalism. But that type of subversive, not thought pattern, but sort of insertion of a thought pattern into the general public has long-standing implications and impacts that have nothing to do with any particular political faction. What that effort did was create a situation in which, and this has been ongoing since my parents' time in college, because that's kind of Russia started pulling that kind of stuff clear back then. As far back as then, the Cold War is probably one of the longest conflicts that we've ever experienced, and in any case, that was influencing the hippies. In fact, hippies were targeted with it. That was influencing the young Republicans. That was influencing churches. That was influencing everybody. And it did influence political conflict clear back then in a way that makes it very difficult for people of different political perspectives to examine the thought processes behind other political perspectives and to examine the facts and logic around those different political perspectives and look at what actually has reasonable and rational applications. Instead, people look at how that fits into their political matrix. How does this fit into the political ideology that I live inside, and how does it go through the filter that I've constructed around that political ideology in order to keep anything out that doesn't jive with my belief system. And that's what you end up with, is everything that doesn't fit is taken as an attack or looked at as evil, not just different.
Right.
And so you end up with a lot of people talking past each other. Like, I'll get into discussions with people who are open-minded but consider themselves feminist, and we end up making each other think, and it, for both sides of that conversation, it is it's work. It's not physical labor, but it's
emotional
labor. It's not emotional either, but it's physically draining, because it is mentally heavy labor to go out and consider things that really challenge your existing outlook. But when you hit somebody that is a really entrenched ideologue, a useful idiot, or an academic cultist, you get the same reaction from both of them. You're scary. They're not going to look at your perspective. They're going to hold up their version of, the crossed fingers, or point at you and squeal like, from the invasion of the body snatchers. And then they're going to run. They're going to block. They're going to report you to Twitter. They're going to throw a temper tantrum. They're going to call lots of other people in to block you and throw temper tantrums. But they're not necessarily going to consider the possibility, for instance, that equal accountability in reproductive choices and the consequences of those reproductive choices might actually be a good thing for both sexes. That women can benefit from being expected to make better decisions, and men can benefit from the same thing. Right. And it's like, it's why I get in trouble from both sides when I say men have a right and a responsibility to use their own birth control, and they also have the right to paternal surrender. And women have a right and a responsibility to use their own birth control, and they have the right to expect that if both sides fail, that either the father will take custody or he will sign away parental rights so the mother can put the baby up for adoption. And like, a guy doesn't have the right to say, I don't want custody, but I won't agree to adoption, and then walk away. But he absolutely has the right to just walk away.
Yeah. Absolutely. I totally agree, of course. With that. I think that this this is the greatest benefit of the internet was that it brought us all together. Like, it brings people together, like people who believe certain things or feel a certain way about certain things. We are able to find each other and just find a community where we feel like we belong. But the absolute con of the internet is now you have people who are reacting to things that you say and you do online, and they decide to cancel you, like, right, the whole cancel culture. We have to now, if you say something that I don't agree with, I now have to then go after your livelihood and try to take you down as a person, so you can no longer say these things that I don't agree with. So it's a blessing and a curse, but this is where we are right now. We are in a fight for our First Amendment, and I really feel like, because of the political scene in the UK and Australia and everywhere else, um, we really, as Americans, we really have to hold on to our Constitution and, hug it tight and remember that these are the things that make us different from every other civilized nation in the world, and that this is something valuable. This is something that we need to protect, because it's not about what I believe or what you believe. It's about our ability to express those opinions and bring them up. Again, sunlight is the best disinfection. If you have an issue, if you have a concern, problem, or whatever, you bring it up, you bring it to light, you talk about it in the public square, and you will know from the reaction what people, if people agree with you, if they believe that this is a cause that they can get behind, or if they think you're just talking shit and you need to go away, right? But so this is what's happening. So Greta Thunberg comes out and says, oh, well, I'm 16 years old, but I feel this way about climate change. But nobody's able to have a negative opinion towards what she's saying. Yes, people have been attacking her for looks, her mental disposition. Okay, that's stupid. What you really need to do is come up against her arguments.
She doesn't
And
have any.
she has none. And
Yeah,
I'm
that's-
sorry, but she is a 16-year-old. Unless she's fucking the Doogie Howser of climate change, I don't want to hear any fucking thing she has to say. It's all opinion.
Oh, and it's not even anything. It's not
Oh, she didn't get up there
fucking.
from my understanding, she didn't get up there and talk science. She got up there and made an emotional argument. She basically
Yes.
made a long appeal to emotion. All right.
Oh
so,
no! What she did,
and threw a
was
lot of blame.
she said, "You adults are failing an entire generation.
Yeah,
you
that's-
adults with your selfishness," and then everybody's like,
Yeah, that's a fallacious
Yeah.
appeal to emotion.
yeah, and but all
honestly,
the adults in the audience that she's berating as being selfish and destructive and ruining her life and ruining her future and all of this stuff, and they're all just like,
Yeah, that's
yes,
what they went there to
that's
hear.
what we're doing, right? And it's not the first time it's happened. There was another fucking 16-year-old girl who testified or gave a speech in front of the UN like fucking 20 years ago on climate change, right? This is an emergency, and we children, we young people are counting on the adults to do the right thing. It's like 25 fucking years ago. It's like 1992 or some shit,
Yep.
right? And she's up there giving pretty much the exact same speech, but without the acting classes, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, because her dad's a freaking actor and director, and her mom's
And
a fucking
grandfather.
opera singer and actress, right?
And grandfather's also a director.
Yeah, so it's like, so you literally have this girl who's being coached by her parents to give the best performance possible, and she's up there berating the adults in the room, right, for not doing enough to save her generation, and it's time to follow the children, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was all done like 20 or 25 years ago. We already tried that, and you know what? The world hasn't ended.
There's an even more fundamental thing than all of that in this. This is child exploitation. It's not sexual exploitation, but it is child exploitation. And hear me out on this. I have seen this from both sides, but it's really, really prevalent among progressives. And they're taking advantage.
Those potty mouth princesses.
No. They're taking. I want to hear me out. They're taking advantage of a tendency among traditionalists to specifically have a protective attitude toward children. Progressives don't have that attitude toward children. They are embracing pedo acceptance narratives, okay?
Yes.
So they're talking about the idea that in their view, it somehow might be okay for adults in some circumstances to have sexual relationships with young people. That's already starting to be accepted.
Yeah, maybe we can add it to the alphabetized
right.
LGBTQ.
They're already trying to push it on the LGBTQ alphabet soup community. And the alphabet soup community, to their credit, is so far telling them to fuck right the hell off, and they should. But they're trying to label pedophilia a sexuality. So that's a fake appeal. They don't give a shit about children. They're not protective of children. They just see children as another weapon that they can use against people who are quite rationally protective of children. Now, on the right, you also have people trying to use the left's exploitation of children as a political weapon. Well, they think that everything children say has to be taken as gospel. So if there's a child on our side that says something, they have to take it as gospel as well. And then they're shocked when the left comes out and not only says reprehensible things to those children, but make death threats. Like the kid that did the cute, funny little mocking AOC video. That kid got death threats. That kid, AOC. Not her parents, but the kid got death threats. Death threats to a child from people on the left. So this it's completely fake when they bitch that somebody said something nasty to a child that they pushed to the forefront and pushed in front of the microphone and gave not a script, but an emotional appeal to, that they emotionally manipulated and got to have a meltdown in front of everybody over an issue. Right?
Exactly.
It's completely fake, and it's completely exploitative, and it completely needs to be called out. And when people start pushing those children forward and then complaining, you can't argue with this point, this political point, because a child said it, you need to say, then we can't take it seriously because a child said it, and you need to stop exploiting that child.
Exactly. And that was what pissed me off the most about this little girl's speech. I won't call her out of her name, but how dare you come to us? Nobody's coming to the fucking children to ask for their fucking opinion. I didn't ask your opinion on climate change. No, you were invited. Okay, so stop this whole, you look to us for hope. Listen.
Yeah. And I would be in school if it wasn't for...
Yeah, I would be in school if it wasn't for the fact that I fucking quit because I can't handle normal conversations with people.
Well, what I want to say too is, it's not just exploitation of children, right? Like, it's not just using these children as human shields for their agenda, right? It's not just that. If Greta Thunberg believes what she's saying, right? Because just recently, in fact, the exact same day, as far as I know, that she gave her speech, 500 scientists with, in the climate science area, co-signed a letter saying to the UN, saying, please stop saying there's a climate catastrophe, right? Please stop pushing this agenda so hard. Please stop stirring up alarm and hysteria. And please stop politicizing the issue. And Oh, what did they also say? They said what I've been saying for the last 10 years. The models that are being used to make these dire predictions are not fit for purpose. They're inadequate. The science is inadequate. They are essentially using tools that are like, okay, so it's somewhere in the range of like, they make these predictions and it's like, oh, with a margin of error of 80 to 75 to 80%, right? Okay, this is what the models are that they're using, right? Because the computational power and the knowledge about the interactions of elements in the climate are not well enough established for us to actually be even using these models, right, to make any kind of predictions. So these predictions have like this massive margin of error, which we have seen over and over and over again. You can't plug the climate details from 1960 into them and predict the global climate in 1990. It always comes up wrong, right? So these models that they're using, but they're making these predictions with absolute certainty. We have 11 years.
Yeah.
Right? 11 years. We know we have 11 years to turn this around.
We had
Otherwise, we're all doomed. Right?
We
and
had 11 years 40 years ago.
I know. And if this girl believes this, it's because she's been convinced of it by irresponsible adults.
Yes.
And if she literally believes this, right? She's being abused.
Mm-hmm.
She's being terrorized by the adults around her.
Absolutely.
And I would say the same thing about the gun control kids. Like, that is a conversation that adults should be having. Not to suggest that we need a bunch of laws regarding this or that with respect to what you can and can't have in terms of a firearm, but if that issue is contentious in the United States, yes, that is a discussion that adults should be having, honestly and openly, with their ideas put on the table, criticized, and decided upon by the greater community, the nation, right? And it's not wrong necessarily for kids to have an opinion on that. But the gun control kids, the kids that have been through school shootings and then are manipulated into activism and showing up at places that sell firearms for hunting and stuff, and doing die-ins where they literally throw themselves on the floor like a toddler and do everything short of kicking and screaming. They're just as manipulated as this girl. Those are kids who have been told that even though the shooter at their school didn't use the type of gun they're protesting against, that law that needs to change, the fact that it hasn't changed, is what's responsible for their shooting. The people who use guns to go hunting, the people who have a firearm in their home for home protection, the people who just like to engage in target practice at their local gun range are responsible for that kid's behavior, and none of the adults who failed him are. And that's just the same kind of emotional manipulation, and they have been just as terrorized, and you can see in their speech that they are in just as much of a panic. I'm gonna call every single freaking progressive atheist out right here, right, with the Greta Thunberg thing, right? Because atheists describe anti-theists describe the teaching of children, right? When you teach children that if you sin, you're going to go to hell, right? That's abuse. That's abuse, and it's coercion. It's abuse and coercion. To tell somebody, right, a lie, essentially a lie, or something true, right, in order to manipulate their behavior, right? And with the threat of some kind of eternal or existential, it's essentially like saying, if you don't behave properly, you're gonna burn in hell for eternity. Well, how is that different from what Greta Thunberg has been told? How is that different?
How is that different from the argument around circumcision? Okay, and I would like to bring this back to that, because it connects with the whole science denial sort of narrative, but like we we are telling people that circumcision prevents an AIDS is transmitted sexually, but not from circumcision. Like, you can't not circumcise a person and then expect that sexually transmitted disease to not transfer on to the next person. However, we are looking at scientific reports by doctors who have been paid to say that circumcision actually helps prevent AIDS. That goes beyond anything that any doctor that I know, any normal thinking human being understands. This is a viral disease, and it happens from direct contact. So,
well, what the circumcision studies are, the 3 African studies were completely bogus right from the get-go, because they stopped them early, and the control group had lead time, right? There was a lead time bias where the control group was having sex for like 2 months, while the circumcised group was unable to have sex because they were healing. And so they had 2 months longer to get infected, and then they stopped the study early when the numbers were starting to even out.
Right, but this
and you look at the U.S., right? Highest rate of circumcision in the Western world, highest rate of HIV transmission.
This is one I want to do a whole show on in the future, because the science versus the... Well, and there's also religious aspects and everything. All of the discussion regarding circumcision. Hell, I have a page on my old blog, Breaking the Glasses. One of my pages instead of like the blog posts. So it's like if you go to breakingtheglasses.blogspot.com, it's in the sidebar into activist links. I have dozens of links that I've like at the bottom of the page you'll see documentation of who I've gotten some of the links from, like in discussion and stuff, and where I found some of them. But I have dozens of links on different aspects of this controversy, and it merits its own show, merits its own discussion, because we could discuss this for 3 hours.
Oh yeah.
And we don't have 3 hours left tonight, so I'm not gonna. No. I don't want to get into a discussion on circumcision tonight. But the bottom line is
Sorry, I just wanted to point out the comparison between...
Yeah, there's definitely a comparison there. There's a comparison in that adults are using a series of lies as an excuse for exploiting children. And I can get more into it in a future show, but in the United States, we have an actual skin trade here. Not like you hear the phrase skin trade used to discuss sexual trade, but we have a business that is built around selling neonatal fibroblasts, which are the skin cells from a foreskin, and they're used for a bunch of different things, including cosmetics, but also including growing skin for skin grafts for burn victims. But so there's a whole bunch of things that get done with this. And the infant whose skin was harvested gets nothing, right? His insurance, or his parents' insurance, or his parents flat out pay to have that skin cut off, to have him tortured, and that skin taken from him, and then he gets nothing for its sale.
That's what he gets.
He gets pain and suffering.
Exactly. He gets the amputation of his penis.
Right. So that's a level of exploitation that is galling and goes beyond, in a way, because then he's subjected to a lifetime of justifications given to him, for this, that are going to convince him to grow up and feel afraid, essentially, when you bring up the idea that this was done to him, not for him. And
Exactly.
that creates a wrong thing boogeyman. It's a lifetime boogeyman. I've run into the people experiencing discussion of circumcision as an issue as a wrong thing boogeyman, and it's not pretty. It's not pretty at all.
Yeah.
And it's very cruel. So
It
in
is.
any case, but I'm gonna take us out of the show because it's 9:30 p.m. here. So we've hit, I think, every angle that I was hoping we would in terms of recognizing the impact of female self-sabotage on both sexes and society at large. So maybe we'll discuss more about it in another show. But I think we've had a pretty good discussion here. So I'm going to hit the super chats. I already read the very first one, and we discussed that a little bit. Albert Nada, who had to leave, I see in the chat before I got to read this, gave us $10 Canadian and asked, now that all three of you have seen my monologue, do you think it deserves a segment on an HBR Talk episode? I'd like as many honey badgers involved as possible, especially Prim Reaper. I think that what was discussed in the North Country monologue relates to a phenomenon with women, sort of blindness towards women have a habit of portraying themselves as victims of certain types of social behavior that are caused necessarily by changes in society, right? And by instinctive tendencies in people, and by the normal reaction to threats of job loss and changes in social roles and things like that. They'll portray themselves as victims of the overall societal reaction to that and to individual reaction to that, and then turn around and have those same reactions themselves and act in the same ways themselves, and they'll be completely blind to the impact of their actions on the people around them. And that really does need to be discussed as an overall issue. And I think that monologue would be a perfect example to use in that issue. So maybe a future show where we talk about women's tendency to not recognize that many of the things that they do portray themselves as victims of, they're not necessarily victims in those instances, and then they also do the same things to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. They're victims of their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thank you, Hannah, because I actually finally watched the video, but I do it is something that does need to be brought up as a topic, and I think it could be a good show if because it is something that's absolutely happening,
Yeah. And I would say when I was a young woman and when I was a teenager and everything, and I was working as a professional photographer, I was working as a professional photographer at 15 years old. Most guys don't get to do that,
Right.
much less a female. And there weren't a lot of women in my area. There's a lot of women that go into wedding photography and portrait photography and stuff like that. There's not as many women. There's women who go into becoming a sports news anchor and being in front of the camera and stuff like that. But there's not very many women who are the person behind the still camera at a sporting event, because there's no recognition in that.
Yeah.
Very, very little recognition in that. In fact, you don't want recognition for that because you want to be able to do it in a way that completely captures the candid nature of what happens on the sidelines and what happens on the field or on the court, or whatever sport you're covering in the rink, and so on.
Right, and you have to know what you're talking about as
well. You do have to know what you're talking about as well, but for the most part, it's not an interactive job. It's a solitary job. It's you and the camera, and you're watching the sport through the camera, and part of your job is to actually avoid contact, especially at a football game. You definitely don't want contact at a football game. I've accidentally done that at a game that I shot where I wasn't used to a team that would pass. I was used to a team that just ran over everybody, and I got in the way off the sideline of the aftermath of a pass, and ended up getting run over. That hurts. So you generally do. It's a solitary job, right? But it's also a job it's dominated by men, and it's very competitive. And of course, you are going to end up with men who resent the idea that this 15-year-old high school girl is walking out on the field like she knows what she's doing, because they don't know that that 15-year-old high school girl that's walking out on the field like she knows what she's doing has been a photographer since she was 2, has been in competitive photography and photographic contests and artistic photography and portrait photography, wedding photography, sports photography, has been doing this for years and actually does know what she's doing. They see a high school kid that's probably a yearbook photographer that picked up a camera last week and doesn't know end from end. And it takes, learning that this girl actually knows the ins and outs of photography, knows what she's supposed to be doing, knows what she's not supposed to be doing, and is not going to get in their way, and isn't going to go, from her little small town newspaper to try to compete with a photographer from, I don't know, the Columbus Dispatch or the Lima News or the Dayton Daily or the Toledo Blade and take their jobs.
Yeah. Exactly. And that goes back to what I was saying about how men in these male dominated industry, they want to see that if there is a female or someone that doesn't look like them, they just want to know that you can do the job.
Right. If they're going to be saddled working with you, they want to know that you're competent.
Exactly.
They want to know that you're serious. They want to know that you're professional. They want to know that you're there to work.
Exactly.
And they're as intimidated about you taking their job as they are about another man.
Right.
And it's not sexism for them to feel that way. And that's something that's one that I want to talk about more on another show, simply because, like he said, with respect to the North Country monologue, women don't recognize when it's just as wrong for them to engage or just as right for them to engage in the same behavior, and that they're not necessarily victims when men do it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, well, I mean, but I want to also say on the job, right? Like my man works for a multinational corporation, and he's a contractor with them, and most of the new hires are not actually hires; they're contractors. And the company gave a big meeting fairly recently, and they were talking about how well they're doing and that, and somebody in the audience had the audacity to ask, does that mean that you're going to hire on contractors as employees? And you know what the company actually just flat out said? We're looking to hire women and minorities. Right? So you literally have men there, Asian and white men, who have been there as contractors for 7, 8, 9 years, who are being passed over for employee status, which, I mean, like when you're a contractor, you have legal liability that you don't have as an employee. You also have, if you mess up, if you screw up and somebody, dies or, something blows up or whatever, right? But also you don't have benefits. You don't have job security. They can get rid of you for any reason, whenever they want. And you don't have access to unemployment insurance, right? So they're literally saying that employee status is only for women and minorities. And when they say minorities, they don't mean Asian men. Because Asian men is a technical job. Asian men are already overrepresented. White men are overrepresented. So it is women, blacks, black men, and indigenous men. And that's who they're looking to actually hire. To give the coveted employee status, a certain number of vacation days, and your overtime pay, and the security of having to have 3 letters of reprimand before you get fired, and the fact that you don't have any legal you can't be sued for, the company gets sued, not you, if something goes wrong and you screwed it up. All of those benefits, right? Medical, dental, life insurance, all of that stuff, right? All of those beautiful things, right? Only for women, black men, and indigenous men. So So, like, do you think that this attitude might foster some resentment?
Right. Resentment, concern, worry. Of course they're not going to be pleased about that.
There are junior women who've been transitioned from contractor to employee. 2 junior women this year who've been transitioned to employee status, while there are senior men in senior positions who've done a great job for 9 fucking years, who are still not offered a job as an employee.
Just as a reminder of what that should communicate, and probably won't, to feminists who might be listening to this, think of the definition of privilege that is often given to us on social media, where we hear
privilege.
Institutional privilege, yeah. But the definition of privilege is having benefits or advantages that are unearned. That's an unearned benefit or advantage, and it's an unearned benefit or advantage that is given to a specific group based on their demographic at the expense of another group based on their demographic. That it imposes a disadvantage on that group. And I know a lot of feminists are probably going to hear that and think, well, yes, but it's because of their privilege. Well, no, it's really not because of their privilege. No. They have had to work. Their privilege is the privilege of having to work and earn everything that they ever get. That's their privilege. Yeah. They don't ever get a handout. They don't ever get a leg up. They don't ever get the benefit of the doubt. They don't even get due process if they're accused in court of discrimination against you. They don't even get due process if they're accused in the workplace of looking at your ass. Even if they didn't do it. But you get handed a position right next to them in the workplace with all of the benefits of that job because of your demographic at the expense of a guy, particularly a white or Asian guy, who may have earned that position but can't have it because he's not part of your demographic. You are privileged. Yeah. You are definitely a recipient of institutional privilege. Exactly. So now I'm not going to continue this discussion, though, because, like I said, this is for another show. This is something that we really cannot go on about. I will have to leave at 11 o'clock, regardless of whether we finish the after show or not. I'm going to finish the last super chat. And this goes back to when we were discussing maturity, and Remy pointed out, Karen pointed out, I just completely called you by the wrong name. You can tell I'm tired. Pointed out that women mature slower because there are things that women don't have to adopt in maturity that men have to adopt in maturity. So things that women haven't developed once we hit our peak maturity, men continue to develop because they are developing things that we don't. And we have French Honey Badger gave us $5 and says, you know who matures mentally earlier? Chimps, cats. More complex species take longer to mature. What does it say about women and men? And I guess that's a pretty good point. I think didn't
there you go. The opposite of the opposite of neoteny is something called acceleration.
Yeah.
Just to let you know.
Didn't Angry Harry make a similar point regarding baboons? And a lot of people got offended about that. And I can't remember the article, but he was talking about the tendency of women to sexually signal starting at a young age too. I mean, we do that. I think I was dressing for the purpose of sexual signaling by the time I was 13. And that was partly because I was just wearing the type of clothing that was popular among 13-year-olds of my generation at that time. And I'm honestly, I probably would have been less likely to do it just myself, but most of the girls around me were already dressing that way by the time we were in the 6th grade. Girls that were wearing skin-tight jeans, V-neck sweaters that would threaten to show your bra. We had to have rules in the school that your shorts had to go past your fingertips when we were allowed to start wearing shorts, which was when I was in high school. There were girls that got sent home because their skirts were too short. They didn't get sent home because their skirts didn't come down past their fingertips. They didn't come down past their underwear. It was called a microskirt. My father called them exaggerated belts. She's not wearing any pants, but she's got on an exaggerated belt. I mean, it's like 5 inches wide, right? From top to, or 5 inches long from top to bottom, and your butt cheeks are hanging out underneath it. It's not an entire article of clothing. So we were dressing to show off our sexual maturity, even when we didn't have it. And Angry Harry wrote about that, and it was one of those things. The discussion was about you cannot turn around and say this kind of behavior is acceptable, but only for one sex. Mm-hmm. And so it can't be acceptable for women to flaunt their sexuality and then get mad when men flaunt theirs back in response. And it cannot be okay for society to condone little girls flaunting their sexuality if it is not okay to notice it. So we have to have a standard there, right? You teach your kids to dress appropriately when they're children, or you deal with the fact that there are going to be people who are going to notice it. And it doesn't necessarily make noticing it healthy. It certainly doesn't make it healthy for the child to be expressing it, not in that particular manner anyway. But right. To treat it like you can just decide that something is bad and it won't happen is irrational and illogical. And I think our society is, I think what I got from that article is that our society is very hypocritical and irrational and endangers everybody by doing that. And I kind of felt like people knee-jerk reacted to that discussion and a few others without considering whether there were things to discuss there that might actually help our society do better all around for children and adults. So yeah, that maturing mentally earlier and the fact that simple species that does say quite a bit about women and men and how we react to things. And I will say a lot of the people that knee-jerk reacted to that article, that I remember seeing knee-jerk react to that article, were women. Egregious Charles gave us $2 and said, "I love you guys," big smiley face. And that is the end of our super chats.
Love you too, Charles.
So I am going to thank everybody for listening. Thanks to my two co-hosts for sticking out the long sausage with me. Sorry, Karen, for calling you somebody else's name. At least it wasn't in the middle of, at least we're not having sex. We're just having a conversation.
Yeah, in at the heights of ecstasy, or anything like that. So I don't take it personally.
Well, this is a fun conversation, but not that much fun. But in any case, and thanks to everybody that has to work in the background to make this happen, make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all.